My name is Serafina, and I am 26 years old. 9 years ago, my father threw me out on the street for refusing his demands. Last week, I stepped off my private jet and walked into his bankruptcy hearing. The man who once called me worthless watched as I bought his empire for pennies on the dollar. But what he does not know yet is that his favorite golden child, my sister Miranda, has been feeding me his secrets for 3 years. The real shock, she is not even his biological daughter. Hey everyone, before we dive into this wild family revenge story, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. If you are ready for a story about justice, betrayal, the sweetest revenge served ice cold, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this tale of family karma will leave you speechless. Trust me, you will want to see how this unfolds. The story begins when I was 17, living in our sprawling mansion in Beverly Hills. My father, Robert Sterling, built his real estate empire from nothing, or so everyone believed. He was the kind of man who demanded absolute obedience, especially from his children. My younger sister Miranda was always his precious princess, while I was expected to be the perfect heir to his business legacy. That fateful night in October started like any other family dinner. The dining room gleamed with crystal and silver, but the atmosphere was ice cold. My father announced his latest business venture, a partnership that would require me to marry the son of his Japanese investor, Kenji Nakamura. At 17, I was supposed to sacrifice my future, my dreams of studying art in Paris, for his profit margins. Absolutely not, I said, setting down my fork with more force than intended. I refused to be sold off like some medieval princess. The silence that followed was deafening. Miranda's eyes went wide, and my stepmother Catherine just stared at her plate. My father's face turned that familiar shade of red that meant someone was about to face his wrath. "You ungrateful little brat," he snarled, standing up so violently his chair toppled backward. "After everything I have given you, this is how you repay me. You will do as I say, or you can get out of my house." I stood up too, matching his energy. "Fine. I would rather live on the streets than be your pawn. Get out, right now, and do not ever come back." Those words echoed in my head as I packed a single suitcase. Miranda followed me to my room, tears streaming down her face. "Sierra, please just apologize. He will calm down tomorrow," she whispered, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "No, Miranda. I am done being afraid of him. I am done pretending his love comes with conditions." I walked out that night with $300, my laptop, and a fierce determination to prove him wrong. I had no idea that Miranda would secretly slip me her savings, $2,000 hidden in my jacket pocket with a note that said, "For your dreams, I believe in you." The first year was brutal. I worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, serving coffee during the day, and tutoring kids in the evening. I slept in a tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood, surviving on ramen noodles and sheer willpower. But I also enrolled in community college, studying business and art with intensity that surprised even me. During those dark months, I would catch glimpses of my family's life through social media. Miranda's Instagram showed lavish parties, designer clothes, and exotic vacations. My father's business continued to thrive, with headlines praising his latest developments. Meanwhile, I was invisible to them, erased from their perfect family portrait. But invisibility became my superpower. While they forgot about me, I was learning, growing, and building something they never expected. I started small, buying and flipping distressed properties with loans I secured through a community development program. My art background gave me an eye for potential that others missed. Within 2 years, I had turned my initial investment into $50,000. The breakthrough came when I was 21. I had saved enough to attend a real estate investment seminar in New York, where I met Elena Vasquez, a brilliant investor who became my mentor. She taught me that information was more valuable than money, and patience was more powerful than aggression. "Your father thinks he is untouchable," Elena said during one of our coffee meetings after I had finally shared my story. "But every empire has cracks. You just need to know where to look." That conversation changed everything. Elena introduced me to a network of investors, lawyers, and investigators who specialized in corporate research. I learned about shell companies, offshore accounts, and the dark art of due diligence. More importantly, I discovered that my father's empire was built on far shakier ground than anyone realized. The first crack appeared when I was 23. Through my research, I found irregularities in his company's tax filings. Properties were being transferred between shell companies in patterns that suggested money laundering, but I needed inside information to prove it. That is when Miranda reached out. Her first message was simple: "I miss you, Sarah. Can we talk?" We met at a small cafe in Santa Monica, far from our father's usual haunts. Miranda had grown into a beautiful woman, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she stirred her coffee. "He is not the same since you left," she said quietly. "He is angrier, more controlling. Sometimes I feel like a prisoner in that house." "Then why stay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because I am scared. And because—" She paused, looking around nervously. "Because I found something. Documents hidden in his safe. Financial records that do not make sense." That was the moment everything changed. Miranda was not just reaching out because she missed me. She was reaching out because she had discovered the same irregularities I was investigating, and she was terrified of what they meant. "I have been copying files," she whispered. "Bank statements, contracts, correspondence. I do not understand half of it, but I know something is wrong." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Miranda, what you are describing could bring down his entire company. Are you sure you want to go down this path?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "He threw you out for standing up to him. I have been a coward for too long. It is time I stood up too." That night Miranda became my secret ally. For 3 years, she carefully documented our father's illegal activities while I built my own empire in the shadows. She would leave USB drives in predetermined locations containing copies of contracts, financial records, and email communications that painted a damning picture of corruption. Meanwhile, I was growing my own business empire. Elena and I formed Sterling Vasquez Investments, deliberately choosing a name that would eventually send a message to my father. We specialized in distressed commercial properties, often bidding against my father's company, without him realizing who was behind the competing offers. By the time I turned 25, I was worth $12 million. But money was never the goal. The goal was justice. And thanks to Miranda's inside information, I finally had everything I needed to serve it. The transformation from heartbroken teenager to calculated strategist did not happen overnight. It crystallized during a cold February morning, when I was 24, sitting in my downtown Los Angeles office, reviewing the latest batch of documents Miranda had provided. Elena sat across from me, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied bank transfer records that painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning nearly a decade. "Serafina, what we have here is not just tax evasion," Elena said, her voice grim. "This is a RICO case waiting to happen. Your father has been using his real estate company to launder money for at least 6 different criminal organizations." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of that revelation settle in my chest. The man who had kicked me out for refusing an arranged marriage was not just a controlling father, he was a criminal. And Miranda, sweet Miranda, who had always been his favorite, had been unknowingly living off blood money for years. "How long do you think we have before someone else discovers this?" I asked. "That depends on how careful he has been with his digital footprints. But based on these transfers..." Elena traced her finger across a series of highlighted transactions. "The FBI might already be watching him. Money movements this large to shell companies in the Cayman Islands do not go unnoticed forever." That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about 17-year-old me walking out into the night with nothing but wounded pride and determination. That girl had wanted to prove her father wrong about her worth. But 24-year-old me wanted something different. I wanted justice, not just for myself, but for everyone he had hurt along the way. I started making lists. Not just of his crimes, but of his victims. The small business owners whose properties he had seized through predatory lending. The families displaced by his gentrification projects. The investors he had defrauded through his shell company schemes. My personal vendetta was expanding into something larger, something that felt like a moral obligation. The strategic pivot began with a phone call to Marcus Chen, one of the most aggressive federal prosecutors in the Southern District of California. Elena had introduced us at a legal conference, and I had been cultivating the relationship for months, knowing this day would come. "I have some information that might interest your white-collar crime division," I told him over lunch at a discreet restaurant in Pasadena. "But I need guarantees about how this information will be used and when." Marcus was intrigued but cautious. "What kind of information are we talking about?" I slid a USB drive across the table. "Bank records, emails, and financial documents proving that Sterling Real Estate has been functioning as a money laundering operation for organized crime syndicates. But I need this investigation to stay quiet until I give you the signal to move." "Why the delay?" "Because there are innocent people who need to be protected before this goes public, and because I want to make sure certain assets are secured before they disappear into offshore accounts." Marcus studied me carefully. "This is personal for you." "Yes, but that does not make it less legitimate." He agreed to my terms, and suddenly I was working with federal investigators while simultaneously building my own case for civil asset forfeiture. The FBI would handle the criminal charges, but I was positioning myself to reclaim everything my father had stolen, both from me and from others. The next 18 months were a masterclass in patience and precision. Miranda continued feeding me information, but now she was also following specific instructions about which documents to copy and when. I taught her basic operational security, using burner phones, encrypted messaging apps, and dead-drop locations that could not be traced back to either of us. "I feel like a spy," she texted me one night after successfully copying the contents of his personal laptop. "You are a spy," I replied. "The question is whether you are ready to be a witness." That question hung between us for months. Miranda was providing the evidence that would ultimately destroy our father, but when the time came, she would need to testify about how she obtained it. She would need to choose publicly and permanently between loyalty to him and loyalty to the truth. During this period, I also began acquiring properties adjacent to my father's developments, not to compete with him directly, but to position myself strategically for what was coming. I knew that when his empire collapsed, there would be a fire sale of assets. I wanted to be ready to buy them all. The first sign that my strategy was working came when I overheard Elena on a phone call with one of her contacts at the Department of Justice. "They have been monitoring Sterling's accounts for 8 months, she told me afterward. "Multiple agencies are involved now. FBI, IRS, FinCEN. Your information accelerated an investigation that was already beginning." I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because justice was finally coming. Sadness because it meant the end of any possibility of reconciliation with my father. Once the federal investigation went public, there would be no going back to being a family, even a dysfunctional one. The emotional complexity deepened when Miranda started showing signs of stress. She had always been the golden child protected from the harsh realities of our father's business. Now she was learning that her entire life had been funded by criminal enterprises, and the psychological toll was evident. "I keep thinking about all the times he lectured us about integrity and hard work," she said during one of our secret meetings. "Was any of it real? Did he ever actually love us, or were we just props in his performance?" I reached for her hand across the table. "Miranda, whatever else he is still our father. I think his love for us was real, even if his methods were twisted. That is what makes this so hard." "Do you ever regret leaving that night?" she asked. I considered the question seriously. "No, because staying would have made me complicit. I would have become part of his system, and eventually I would have had to choose between my conscience and my comfort. He forced me to make that choice at 17, and I am grateful for that now. I am making that choice now, at 23. Better late than never, right?" Right. As winter turned to spring, all the pieces were falling into place. The federal investigation was ready to move to the next phase. My own business empire was positioned to survive the coming storm. and Miranda had gathered enough evidence to ensure that justice would be swift and comprehensive. But there was one more element I needed before I could execute my plan. I needed to know exactly when my father would be most vulnerable, when his attention would be focused elsewhere, when he would least expect an attack from his forgotten daughter. The opportunity came in the form of an invitation to his annual charity gala, an event I had not been invited to in 9 years, but which Miranda suggested I attend as her +1. The invitation to my father's charity gala felt like a gift from the universe. For 9 years I had been persona non grata at Sterling family events, but Miranda's suggestion that I attend as her guest was the perfect cover for what I had planned. The gala, held at the Beverly Hills Hotel, would be attended by every major player in Los Angeles real estate, including several of my father's criminal associates who had no idea they were about to be exposed. "Are you sure you are ready for this?" Elena asked as we reviewed our final preparations. "Once you walk into that room, there is no turning back. Your father will see you, and he will know something is happening." I adjusted the diamond necklace I had bought for the occasion, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I wanted my father to see exactly how well I had done without him. I have been ready for this since I was 17 years old, sleeping on a friend's couch. The week leading up to the gala was intense. Marcus and his FBI team finalized their arrest warrants and seizure orders. I coordinated with my legal team to ensure my civil suits would be filed simultaneously with the criminal charges. Most importantly, Miranda and I rehearsed every aspect of the evening, from how we would present ourselves to how she would signal me when our father was distracted. "I have been thinking about what I am going to say to him," Miranda told me during our final planning session. "When this all comes out, when he realizes I have been working against him, what have you decided? That I am going to tell him the truth. That I love him, but I love justice more. And that you taught me the difference." The night of the gala, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, applying red lipstick with steady hands. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the broken teenager who had left this same city 9 years ago. I was wearing a black Versace gown that hugged every curve I had earned through years of disciplined living. My hair was pulled back in an elegant updo that showcased the diamond earrings Elena had given me for luck. But more than my appearance, it was my eyes that had changed. They held a confidence and determination that my 17-year-old self could never have imagined. Miranda picked me up in her Tesla, and I could see her nervousness in the way she gripped the steering wheel. "Sierra, what if he recognizes you immediately? What if he makes a scene? Then he makes a scene. But remember, Miranda, we are not doing anything wrong tonight. We are simply attending a charity event. Everything else happens tomorrow." The Beverly Hills Hotel was spectacular, draped in white silk and golden lights that made every surface shimmer. As we walked through the entrance, I felt the familiar flutter of anticipation that had carried me through every major business deal of my career. This was just another negotiation, except the stakes were my family's future and my own sense of justice. We had been inside for perhaps 20 minutes, making small talk with other guests, when I saw him across the room. Robert Sterling, my father, holding court near the auction display. He looked older than I remembered, his dark hair now silver at the temples, but he still commanded attention the way he always had. He was laughing at something one of his associates had said, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. "He has not seen us yet," Miranda whispered. "Good. Let him enjoy his last night of freedom." As the evening progressed, I found myself studying not just my father, but the entire ecosystem he had built around himself. I recognized several faces from the financial documents Miranda had copied. Men who had funneled dirty money through my father's shell companies, women who had acted as fronts for his illegal operations. They were all here celebrating their success, completely oblivious to the federal investigation that was about to destroy them. The most surreal moment came when James Nakamura, the son I was supposed to have married, approached our table with a drink in his hand. "Miranda, you look absolutely stunning tonight," he said, then noticed me. "And you brought a friend." Miranda's face went pale, but I smiled smoothly. "James, I do not think we have been properly introduced. I am Serafina." He studied my face for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning. "Serafina. Sterling, Robert's elder daughter. The very same." James looked genuinely shocked. But I thought, your father said you had moved to Europe years ago. That you were pursuing art or something. I was pursuing something, I said, maintaining my smile. It just was not art. Before James could ask more questions, Miranda skillfully redirected the conversation, but I could see him glancing at me throughout the rest of the evening. Word would spread quickly through this crowd that Robert Sterling's disowned daughter had mysteriously reappeared, looking very much like someone who had done well for herself. The pivotal moment came during the auction portion of the evening. My father took the stage to introduce a painting that would raise money for his favorite charity, a foundation that, according to Miranda's documents, was actually another front for money laundering. As he spoke about the importance of giving back to the community, I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, his voice carrying across the ballroom, "success is not just about what we build for ourselves, but what we build for future generations. Family legacy, integrity, these are the values that define us." The irony was suffocating. This man who had thrown his own daughter onto the street for defying him who had built his empire on criminal enterprises was lecturing a room full of people about family values and integrity. That is when I made a decision that was not part of our original plan. I raised my paddle and bid on the painting. The auctioneer acknowledged my bid, and I felt the energy in the room shift. People began turning to see who was bidding, and I heard whispers ripple through the crowd. My father, still on stage, squinted into the lights, trying to identify the bidder. Someone else raised their paddle, doubling my bid. I doubled theirs. The price climbed quickly from $5,000 to $20,000 to $50,000. The auctioneer was clearly delighted with the unexpected bidding war, but the tension in the room was palpable. Finally, at $75,000, the other bidder dropped out. "Sold," the auctioneer called out, to the lady in black. As the spotlight found me, I stood up slowly, letting my father see exactly who had just purchased his painting for more money than most people in that room made in a year. The recognition hit his face like a physical blow. His mouth fell open, his face went white, and for a moment I thought he might collapse right there on stage. Miranda grabbed my arm. "Sarah, what are you doing? This is not part of the plan. I am sending a message," I whispered back. "I want him to spend tonight wondering what else I am capable of." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of curious glances and whispered conversations. My father did not approach our table, but I could feel his eyes on me constantly. When it was time to leave, I walked to the payment desk and wrote a check for $75,000 like it was pocket change. As Miranda and I headed toward the exit, Catherine Sterling, my stepmother, intercepted us. "Serafina," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "your father would like to speak with you." I turned to face her, this woman who had never shown me an ounce of kindness when I lived in their house. "Catherine, please give my father a message. Tell him that some conversations are worth waiting for. And tell him that he will hear from me very soon." We left the hotel with every eye in the room following us. As we drove away, Miranda was practically vibrating with nervous energy. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait until morning, and then we watch his world burn." The drive back to my downtown penthouse was quiet, but my mind was racing. Tomorrow, federal agents would execute search warrants on Sterling real estate. Tomorrow, the man who had once called me worthless would discover that his discarded daughter had orchestrated his downfall. Tomorrow, justice would finally be served. But tonight I was content knowing that he would not sleep a single minute wondering what I was planning and how I had become powerful enough to casually spend $75,000 just to send him a message. At 6 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "It's showtime. Federal agents are moving on Sterling real estate in 30 minutes. Are you ready?" I was already dressed in my best power suit, sitting in my penthouse overlooking downtown Los Angeles with a cup of coffee and the morning news. "Ready," I replied. The next text came from Miranda. "Dad's at the office early today. He's been there since 5 a.m. He knows something is coming." Perfect. I wanted him to be there when the FBI arrived. I wanted him to experience the same shock and helplessness I had felt at 17 when he threw me out with nothing. By 7:15, my phone was buzzing constantly. The first call came from Elena. Serafina, turn on Channel 7 News. They're already covering it. I switched to the local news and saw aerial footage of Sterling Real Estate headquarters surrounded by FBI vehicles. The Chiron read, "Breaking, federal raid on major LA real estate developer." The reporter's voice filled my living room. FBI agents executed search warrants this morning at Sterling Real Estate, owned by prominent developer Robert Sterling. Sources indicate this is part of a multi-year investigation into alleged money laundering and racketeering. The second call came from my attorney David Park. The civil suits have been filed. We're seeking asset forfeiture on 17 properties plus damages totaling $43 million. The paperwork hit the courthouse at exactly 7:30. I felt a cold satisfaction watching the news coverage. Years of planning, months of evidence gathering, all coming together in one devastating morning. But this was just the beginning. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into the offices of Sterling Vasquez Investments. Elena was waiting with champagne and a stack of legal documents. "To justice," she said, raising her glass. "To family," I replied, thinking of Miranda, who had risked everything to help expose the truth. The real moment of vindication came at 10:30. I was in my office when David called with the update I had been waiting for. "Serafina, your father's been arrested." They took him out of his office in handcuffs. The charges include money laundering, racketeering, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. His bail hearing is set for tomorrow morning. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to feel the full weight of that moment. 9 years ago, he had destroyed my life with a few angry words. Today, his own words, recorded in emails and phone calls Miranda had documented, were destroying his. But the most satisfying call came from Miranda herself. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." When the FBI agents were leading Dad away, he looked directly at me and asked if I knew this was happening. I told him the truth. "What did you say?" I said, "Dad, you taught me that actions have consequences. And you taught Serafina that family loyalty goes both ways. You just never thought we would learn those lessons so well." That afternoon, I did something I had been planning for months. I called a press conference. Standing in front of the cameras, wearing the same red dress I had worn to close my first major business deal, I made a statement that would be replayed on every news channel in Los Angeles. "My name is Serafina Sterling, and I am Robert Sterling's daughter. 9 years ago, my father threw me out of his house for refusing to participate in what I now know was part of his criminal enterprise. Today, I am here to announce that Sterling Vasquez Investments will be acquiring the assets of Sterling Real Estate through a court-supervised sale. Every penny of profit from these acquisitions will go toward compensating the victims of my father's crimes." The questions came fast and aggressive. "Miss Sterling, did you cooperate with federal investigators?" I provided information that I believed was relevant to their investigation. "Are you seeking revenge against your father?" "I am seeking justice for everyone he harmed, including his own family." "What do you say to people who think you betrayed your father?" I paused, thinking about 17-year-old me, walking out into the night, thinking about Miranda risking her safety to gather evidence, thinking about all the people whose lives had been destroyed by his greed. I say that loyalty cannot exist without respect, and respect cannot exist without integrity. My father taught me those values, even if he forgot to follow them himself. The press conference was broadcast live, which meant my father saw it from his holding cell. According to his attorney, who called my lawyer later that day, Robert Sterling's only comment was, "I underestimated her." That evening, Miranda came to my penthouse. She looked exhausted but relieved, like someone who had been carrying a heavy weight for years and finally set it down. "The house feels so empty," she said, settling onto my couch with a glass of wine. "Catherine is talking to divorce attorneys. The FBI seized Dad's passport so he cannot run. And the media is camped outside our front gate." "I am sorry this is hurting you," I said, and I meant it. "No, Sierra, I am not hurt. I am free. For the first time in my life, I feel free." We talked until 3 in the morning, processing everything that had happened, everything that was still to come. Miranda would testify at our father's trial, which was expected to last several months. I would oversee the redistribution of his assets, making sure every victim received compensation. And together we would figure out what it meant to be sisters without the shadow of his manipulation hanging over us. The final piece of my plan executed itself the next morning. Robert Sterling's bail was set at $5 million, money he could not access because all his accounts had been frozen. The man who had once commanded respect through fear and wealth was now sitting in a county jail cell wearing an orange jumpsuit, completely powerless. Justice, I realized, was not about revenge. It was about balance. For 9 years, the scales had been tipped in his favor while innocent people suffered. Today, those scales were finally level. As I sat in my office the morning after his arrest, looking out at the city he had once dominated, I thought about the 17-year-old girl who had walked out of his house with nothing but pride and determination. She would have been amazed to see how this story ended, but she would not have been surprised. Even then, even at her lowest point, she knew that someday, somehow, the truth would come out. She just never imagined it would feel this satisfying. The morning after my father's arrest, I woke to my phone buzzing with messages from reporters, old family friends, and business associates. The story had gone viral overnight. "Disowned daughter brings down real estate empire" was trending on social media, complete with side-by-side photos of 17-year-old me being escorted out of the family mansion, and present-day me at the press conference. But the message that mattered most came from Marcus at 6 a.m. "Your father's assets are frozen. Sterling Real Estate is officially under federal receivership. The court has appointed you as the preferred buyer for all liquidated properties. Congratulations, Serafina. You just inherited your father's empire." I made coffee and stood on my balcony watching the sunrise paint the Los Angeles skyline gold. Somewhere across the city, Robert Sterling was waking up in a jail cell, probably wondering how his discarded daughter had orchestrated his complete destruction. The irony was not lost on me. The man who had built his wealth on lies and manipulation had been brought down by the daughter he had thrown away for being too honest. Elena arrived at my penthouse by 8, carrying legal documents and wearing the biggest smile I had ever seen on her face. "Serafina, we need to move fast. The federal court is fast-tracking the asset sale because they want to minimize further financial damage to legitimate investors. You have 72 hours to submit purchase offers for 14 commercial properties, 6 residential developments, and Sterling Real Estate's headquarters building." I had been preparing for this moment for months. How much liquidity do we need? $47 million for the entire portfolio. At current market rates, these properties are worth over $200 million, but the fire sale pricing means we can acquire everything for roughly 23 cents on the dollar. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of legal meetings, property inspections, and financial transfers. I barely slept, surviving on coffee, and the pure adrenaline of watching my father's empire become mine piece by piece. Every contract I signed felt like another step toward complete vindication. But the real emotional impact hit me when I walked into Sterling Real Estate headquarters for the first time in 9 years. The building that had once intimidated me now felt hollow and desperate. Employees were packing boxes, uncertain about their futures. Security guards who had once escorted me out now nodded respectfully as I walked through the marble lobby. The top floor, where my father's corner office overlooked the city, was exactly as I remembered it. Massive windows, leather furniture walls covered with photos of him shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. The only difference was the yellow crime scene tape blocking the entrance. "Miss Sterling," a voice behind me made me turn. It was Jennifer Walsh, my father's longtime assistant, holding a banker's box full of personal items. "Hello, Jennifer. I just wanted to say, I always wondered what happened to you. When you left, your father told everyone you had moved to Europe. But I never believed that story. Why not? Because you were the only person in this family who ever looked him in the eye when you disagreed with him. I knew someday you would be back." Jennifer handed me an envelope. "I found this in his safe when the FBI finished their search. It is addressed to you." My hands shook slightly as I opened the letter, written in my father's distinctive handwriting. "Times. Serafina, if you are reading this, then you have won. I always knew you were stronger than Miranda, smarter than me, and more determined than anyone gave you credit for. I threw you out because I was afraid of what you might become if you stayed and learned to hate me gradually instead of all at once. I was right to be afraid. You want to know the truth, I am proud of you. Even now, even facing prison, I am proud that my daughter became someone I could never control. The combination to my personal safe is your birthday. Inside you will find documents that belong to you, things I should have given you years ago. Your mother would have been proud too. Dad, I stared at the letter for a long time, feeling emotions I was not prepared to process. Anger, sadness, confusion, and underneath it all, a grief I had been carrying for 9 years without realizing it. The safe contained documents I had never seen before. My mother's will, which left me a trust fund worth $3 million that my father had hidden from me. Stock certificates in my name that he had never transferred. And at the bottom, a photo of my mother holding baby me with a note on the back, "For Serafina, my strong-willed daughter. Never let anyone dim your light." That night, Miranda found me in our father's office, sitting in his chair with the photo in my hands. "The bail bondsman called," she said quietly. "Dad made bail. Catherine put up the house as collateral. Is he coming here?" "No." His attorneys advised him to stay away from all Sterling real estate properties. Plus, his passport is still confiscated, and he has a GPS ankle monitor. Miranda sat down across from me in the chair where I used to sit during the rare times he summoned me to his office. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. When the FBI agents interviewed me yesterday, they asked about you, about whether you had planned this revenge for years. What did you tell them?" "I told them that you did not plan revenge. You planned justice, and there is a difference." The destruction of my father's reputation was swift and complete. Within a week, every major newspaper had run exposé pieces about his criminal enterprises. Former business partners rushed to distance themselves from him. The charity foundation that bore his name quietly removed his involvement from their website. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. James Nakamura, the man I was supposed to have married, held his own press conference. 9 years ago, Robert Sterling proposed a business partnership that would have been sealed through marriage between his daughter and myself. When Serafina refused, Sterling told my family that she was mentally unstable and had run away from home. We now know that Serafina Sterling is one of the most successful real estate investors in Los Angeles, and that her father's characterization of her was completely false. I want to publicly apologize to Miss Sterling for believing those lies, and I want the business community to know that Sterling's word cannot be trusted. Watching that press conference, I felt the last piece of my father's narrative about me crumble away. For 9 years, he had told people I was a failure, a disappointment, someone who could not handle the responsibilities of the family business. Now the entire city knew the truth. The week concluded with a phone call from Marcus Serafina. "Your father's attorney reached out about a plea deal. Sterling wants to meet with you before he makes any decisions about trial versus cooperation." "What kind of meeting, face-to-face?" "Father and daughter. No attorneys, no recording devices. Just the two of you talking about how this ends." I looked out the window of what was now my office at the city that had watched me rise from nothing and made my decision. Set it up. It is time my father and I had our final conversation. The meeting with my father took place in a sterile conference room at his attorney's office. I had not seen him since the charity gala, and the change was striking. Robert Sterling, the man who had once commanded rooms full of powerful people, looked smaller somehow. The orange jail jumpsuit had been replaced with an expensive suit, but he could not hide the exhaustion in his eyes, or the GPS monitor around his ankle. We sat across from each other at a polished conference table, two people who had shared a home for 17 years but felt like strangers. The silence stretched between us until he finally spoke. "You look like your mother when she was angry with me," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "Do not bring her into this. She would be horrified by what you became." "Yes, she would." He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "Serafina, I need to know something. When did you decide to destroy me? Was it that night I threw you out, or did it happen later?" I considered lying, giving him the simple answer he expected. But after everything we had been through, he deserved the complicated truth. I never decided to destroy you, Dad. I decided to build something better than what you offered me. Your destruction was just a side effect of your own choices. The FBI says you have been gathering evidence against me for 3 years. I have been gathering evidence of your crimes for 3 years. The fact that those crimes would destroy you was your decision, not mine. He was quiet for a long moment, processing this distinction. Your sister says you offered her a way out, that you could have exposed me without involving her, but you gave her the choice to be part of taking me down. Miranda deserved to choose her own path. You never gave either of us that courtesy. And what path have you chosen, Serafina? You have my business, my reputation, my freedom. What do you want now? I pulled out a folder containing documents I had prepared for this moment. I want to offer you something you never offered me. A choice. His eyebrows raised as I slid the papers across the table. What is this A deal? You cooperate fully with federal investigators. You provide testimony against every criminal organization you laundered money for. You accept responsibility for every crime you committed. In exchange, I will personally fund the best defense team money can buy for your sentencing hearing. Why would you do that? Because despite everything you did, despite how you treated me, you are still my father. And because Miranda loves you even now, your cooperation could reduce your sentence from 20 years to 8 years. That is the difference between dying in prison and maybe having a relationship with your daughter again someday. He stared at the papers for a long time. What about Sterling Real Estate? What about everything I built? Everything you built was built on lies and stolen money. But everything I build from here will be legitimate. I am going to turn your company into something that actually helps people instead of exploiting them. And if I do not cooperate, then you spend the rest of your life in federal prison and Miranda and I move on without you. The choice is yours, just like it was mine 9 years ago when you threw me out. He signed the cooperation agreement that afternoon. 6 months later, I stood in the same courtroom where I had filed my first lawsuit against Sterling Real Estate, watching my father receive his sentence. 8 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole in 5. The judge noted his cooperation with investigators, which had led to the arrest of 14 other defendants in what prosecutors called the largest money laundering ring in Los Angeles history. As the bailiffs led him away, he looked back at Miranda and me sitting in the front row. I saw him mouth the words "thank you" before disappearing through the side door. That evening, Miranda and I had dinner at the penthouse. She had decided to go back to school studying social work, so she could help other families destroyed by white-collar crime. The trust fund our father had hidden from me was paying for her education. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked, looking out at the city lights below us. "I think we did the only thing we could live with," I replied. "We chose justice over revenge and truth over family loyalty. That is what Mom would have wanted." "What happens now?" I smiled, thinking about the plans Elena and I had developed for Sterling Vasquez Investments. "Now we build something better. We turn Dad's properties into affordable housing. We create a foundation to help families displaced by predatory lending. We hire the employees he laid off and treat them with respect. If you want. I could use a partner who understands that business is about more than profit." Miranda raised her wine glass. "To chosen family. To chosen family." The final piece of my story came together a year later. I was sitting in my office, formerly my father's office, now completely redecorated, when Jennifer knocked on my door. "Miss Sterling, there is someone here to see you. He says he is from the FBI." Marcus walked in carrying a bottle of champagne and a huge smile. "Serafina, I wanted to personally deliver some news. The last defendant in the Sterling money laundering case was convicted this morning. Your father's cooperation led to convictions in 47 cases, and the government has recovered over $200 million in stolen assets. What happens to the money? It goes to victim compensation. Every family your father defrauded, every business owner he cheated, every investor he lied to, they are all getting their money back with interest. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that justice had been served not just for me but for everyone my father had harmed. As I write this story today, 3 years have passed since that night. I walked out of the charity gala knowing my father's world was about to collapse. Sterling Vasquez Investments is now one of the most respected real estate companies in California. We have built over 3,000 units of affordable housing and created a foundation that has helped hundreds of families recover from financial fraud. Miranda graduated summa cum laude and now runs our victim advocacy program. She visits our father in prison once a month, and slowly, carefully, they are rebuilding some kind of relationship. I have not visited him yet, but his letters tell me he understands why. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about destroying my father's empire. The answer is no. I feel proud that I chose truth over comfort, justice over family loyalty, and building something positive over nursing a grudge. The 17-year-old girl who walked out with nothing but determination would be amazed to see how this story ended. But she would not be surprised. Even then, she knew that integrity was worth more than money, that truth was stronger than fear, and that sometimes the best way to honor your family is to refuse to become like them. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what is right? When karma finally caught up to someone who wronged you, did it feel like justice or just revenge? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences help other people feel less alone in their struggles. If this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up to toxic family dynamics and finding your own path to success. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes walking away from family is the most loving thing you can do. For them and for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is never determined by the people who refuse to see it. Sometimes the family that raises you and the family that loves you are completely different groups of people, and that is perfectly okay. Until next time, keep choosing truth over comfort and never let anyone convince you that their version of loyalty is worth more than your integrity. Family karma has a way of working itself out, but justice takes courage, planning, and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. Trust me, the wait is worth it.